Okay, so for the Kismet, for the player damage and death and all that kind of stuff, I'm gonna let me just show the damage here quick first. It's the smaller of the two. Now, so just bear with me on these on all these things. I'm gonna remember what I did and why I did it as I talk. So I basically make all these videos on the fly. I don't prepare anything. So just bear with me on these. um, so like I've explained before, on the enemy attack, I get the player's health before I shoot the projectile, and then also after. And so um, I compare those two, and if the if if the health goes, if you get hit by the projectile and your health goes down, then this stuff happens. And all this really does is spawn the blood effect. And it seems a little like much to do it like this, but what I found was um, on the projectile, you've got this damage radius, and um, I set it really low. Like I set it on 1, it didn't want to work. I set it on point 0.1, it didn't want to work. I set it on 0.001, it didn't want to work. So ultimately, the problem was that the enemy would shoot the projectile and they would keep killing themselves. Um, and I found that it's the damage radius causing it. Regardless of being like 0.001 or whatever. The enemy would hit you a few times and then just disappear because they died. And so making this radius 0, I found that that doesn't happen anymore. But the side effect of making this 0 is this explosion effect, which is what you can use, to spawn the blood effects or whatever impact effects you want to do. Um, they don't spawn anymore now. I don't have an effect in there because it's actually useless to have it because they don't spawn because this is 0. Um, so back to this. So this is why I do this, and like I said, it does seem like a bit much just to get that, but that was ultimately my solution for not going crazy and you know whatever. It just kind of drove me crazy that the enemies kept killing themselves. Even though I kept thinking it can't be the radius because it's so damn low, but it ended up being the radius, and then I switch it to 0, and then the damn effects doesn't spawn. But anyway, this is all my typical kind of thing: get the location, the rotation, and spawn the effect. And add some value so that I can spawn it higher on the character, and it just simply spawns basically a blood effect, which I'll obviously show some video of the game in action and see all that stuff working. Um, so that's the player damage. So for the death, I did I did try and use the default stuff where the player's health goes down to 0 and you essentially die, and it's all whatever the scripting was for it, and that didn't really work for me because of how I'm using the pawn, the mobile placeable pawn, and basically possess the actual the pawn that you place, the spawn point for, and things like that. And, I basically just didn't want to spend much time trying to figure out how to deal with it. I just dealt with it straight in Kismet, and the way I dealt with it is by never making the player's health go down to zero, and I'll just control my own gameplay like that. Like I'll control my own lives and everything like that, and my respawning and everything. I'll control like that instead of trying to make use of the pre-scripted system that's done for like Unreal Tournament or whatever. So with that explanation out of the way, the first thing obviously is getting the player damage, and that I believe is called over here. So it's called anytime the enemy attacks you, whether they hit you or not. Then I do a comparison, and you can obviously only die once they've hit you a bunch of times. So I do my comparison against 50. This ensures that I think my damage is 15, 10 or 15 or something. I think it's 15, and my initial health is like 100 let me see if I can see quickly. Where is my we'll get there, but my initial health is like 150 or 160 or something like that. So it does I call the damage on any player, on any enemy attack, does the comparison, and only when it drops below 50 then I'm technically dead. So I never reach zero. What actually happens when I reach zero is I lose control of the character. I can't respawn and redo all that other stuff. Basically, I didn't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure out like how to make use of that, like I've mentioned before. So do the comparison. When you go below 50, you're dead, so this stuff happens. So this you can kind of ignore. This was my test, so it's just when I press D, I go into death mode, and this is for testing purposes, so I don't have to keep trying to get hit by enemies to test it. And I've got some logs in here which I've just kept in for now. So one of the first things I do when you die is I disable all the controls, so you can't, because you technically the character isn't dead. He's still there, so you can still run around and jump and do everything. So yeah, I disable all of that, and I've got some events set up for that, so I just call those events. Then I teleport the crowd destination away from the player, otherwise the remaining enemies will just come to where the player died and keep hitting air, so that's a bad thing. So I basically just teleport it off to the side, and you die and the enemies actually immediately walks out of camera view. So that works pretty good. If I come across a situation where it causes me trouble, then I'll rethink this, but this seems to work pretty well. Then I modify the health. Okay, so here's my total health is 165. So immediately after I died, I basically just set the player's health back to full, because now you're gonna respawn. So set the player's health back to full. I actually hide the player, I hide the sword, and I hide the cloth that I've got attached to the side of the skeletal mesh of the player. I do a bit of a delay. I can't remember if there was a reason for the delay. Like I've mentioned, I do delays every now and again when I do stuff like this, just to keep it running smoothly. Especially when I'm going to start doing some specific new stuff, then I always do just a little bit of a delay. But anyway, so when the player dies, you obviously want to see something happen to him, and I just like with the enemies, I didn't want to deal with death animations and things like that. They hardly, like, there's too many situations where they don't work well, like if it happens on steps or against a wall or something like that, the ragdoll to me is just a perfect solution for that. So same for the player. I pretty much get the location of the player, and I actually, in this one, I end up changing the collision. Now you'll see I've got player pawn and player pawn old. Now the difference is simply that this is the actual pawn that when you place a spawn point for a player to start, that's the actual pawn, and then this is the mobile placeable pawn. And I actually possess this pawn because there's things with crowd actors where you've got radiuses and things like that from the player, and I actually spawn the player way off to the side, and I just don't want to use huge radiuses, so technically I'm controlling this guy, so he's on screen actually, by using the playable pawn. So some stuff I actually have to call on the mobile pawn, like the collision, so the reason why I have to do this is just simply because now you're dead, and you don't want these things to interfere with other stuff that needs to happen. So I call that this interp actor is it's not from there. Is this guy? It's the guy I use for pushing ragdolls. So I have to disable that, and because now I'm spawning in a ragdoll, and I don't want that to spawn inside collision. Otherwise, it jumps off screen or something weird happens to it. So get location, change the collision before I spawn in the ragdoll, and spawn in the ragdoll, and this hand damage force. This is also a rigid body force, exactly the same as the other one. It's one that I actually had there previously that I used for punching damage. And the reason why I'm using a different one is because I want it in a different place. So it's just that. So as soon as the ragdoll spawns in, this pushes it back. And then there's just a bit of a delay, so you kind of lie there on the ground a little bit, and then you respawn, and that's what the teleport. So the teleport is basically the respawn, and it just teleports back to the trigger object there, which is back there at the beginning. So the way my stuff works really is this is my spawn point, which you need to run the level. This is my mobile placeable. So you spawn in, this guy takes over, and then I possess this guy, and then I teleport over here, and then the game starts, right? So when you die, this is also where you respawn for now, and I can obviously change these points along the level to whichever point I want to respawn to. So that happens. You teleport, delay for just half a second, bring back the collision, right? So the player goes back to normal. Bring back the collision on this guy, and the reason why there's two instead of one, like on this one there's one, because I can just go into no collision on both of them at the same time, but they actually use different types of collision. So on this one I have to use the custom default, and on this one I have to use the block weapon kickable. And then I bring back the crowd destination target so that the enemies will follow me again. And then I destroy the ragdoll. So all that happens really, simultaneously almost. And then also call, so you spawn in, and you basically teleport back to the starting point there. Sorry, you don't spawn in, but you teleport back to the starting point there, and this stuff happens. But then I also call in or I spawn in a particle effect for the respawn, and then I just have a really short delay, and then I toggle everything back on. So now the player comes back, the sword comes back, and the cloth comes back, and then again just a bit of a delay, and then I switch back all the controls. So now you can play again. Now this seems like explaining it like that seems like everything happens in slow motion, but like all of this stuff happens really in the blink of an eye. You die, the ragdoll spawns in, you lie there for like 2 seconds, and then you jump back to the start, the particle effect happens, and then you can run off again and kill some mummies, I guess. Or re-kill some mummies. I don't know what you do with mummies. You break them. But anyway, yeah, so that's basically the play death. I mean, what I haven't implemented is lives, which is obviously you know not that big of a deal, just a simple counter. And yeah, and I also haven't implemented yet the ability to pick up my the health boxes that I've already got there. I just need to actually implement their so that they actually work, and it'll be as simple as doing the doing the modified property there on the health, and just adding back health. So I think that explains all that, and I don't think I left anything out. I'm gonna also show a gameplay video of all this stuff in action, and I'll mention again, I think I've mentioned before, if you see something in the video that doesn't make sense to you, maybe drop me a message, maybe drop a message on the UDN where I post my video updates more specifically, or or in the actual YouTube section. And yeah, I'll try and clear up whatever's I can think that some of this stuff looks really kind of patched together and doesn't make much sense, but I try and explain it without redoing it step by step. I think it should make sense. So I think I'm gonna just jump over to the next video, just showing a little bit of my Kismet cleanup and what's involved in that I've started doing, and I'll eventually clean up all of these sequences so that my first Kismet page is pretty much clean. So yeah, I'll show that in the next video.